very weak.
It's getting more full the more that I drink it. I don't know what's happening.
The two planes of existence. That's a little heavier than I want to think on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's
on a Friday.
On a Friday. Friday. You say today was Friday?
It's Friday.
That must mean this is a 15-minute Friday, folks. Welcome back to the show. You heard it. It's a 15-minute Friday. We're making it happen. Where myself and a returning guest, we sit down one more time. We're talking about a specific topic or subject with the goal and the hope of sending you into your weekend or your upcoming week with some positive, actionable, or thought-provoking advice and opinion. As I start the clock and the 15 minutes begins to rack up, Josh Emerick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me back.
So the subject of this 15-minute Friday is honestly, I think, a pretty fun one, something that hopefully we give some helpful advice within. It is how to quit a job that you hate. Now, I think it's fair to say that over the years, this is a conversation that you and I have had with many people. And I think there's 100 different ways that this could go. But I feel like there's always something that, like, the thing that I want to start with is there's always something that tells people, like, when they hate a job, of course you want it to be over as quickly as possible, right? When you're in any bad situation, I just want to get through this. I want this to be done. Let's solve it, right? I think one of the major things that I always tell people is, like, okay, let's think about future you. Like, you right now, you want to get out of this job. Absolutely. We don't have to pretend like, okay, if you absolutely hate it and there's nothing that you can find that you like about it, that's kind of the person we're talking to, right? There's no room of the extra conversation of, well, hey, what could you make better at your job? Because that's probably a whole other episode in itself, right? How to make the job you hate better. We'll do that 15-minute Friday at some point. But I think it's all about making a plan, setting that future date, because people look at that right now mentality of, I hate my job. I don't want to go back tomorrow. I don't want to go back next week. And they sort of almost put so much weight on their own shoulders of just that being the only solution. At least that's what I found through many of those conversations. People are like, well, I can't quit because I need to pay rent next month. Absolutely. You need to pay rent for the next 6 months, the next 6 years, whatever it is, right? You have those bills. That thing is going to be there. So we can't use the money example in that problem as well, I have to pay the bill, so I can't quit my job yet. That's going to be a thing that you're going to be telling yourself 6 months from now, 6 months from then, 2 years, whatever, because those factors are never going to go away. What we can change is, okay, how do we make that money to pay those bills? So make that plan is always my kind of first thing, and identify that you don't have to do it right now in this moment. That's imaginary pressure that I think a lot of people put on their shoulders because of those factors like money and bills. You got to think forward a little bit. You got to think a handful of months into the future. Maybe make that date of, like, all right, I don't like this job right now. Cool. Can you maintain it? Can you put up with it for the next 6 months? And during that 6 months, we're not waiting 6 months and then in whatever later this year, you're just walking in, quitting, and then saying, oh my God, I don't have a job. Let's take that 6 months to make that plan. Let's take that 6 months to figure out what else is going to supplement this, what is going to take its place, whether it's fulfillment like hobbies or whatever that you're going to spend your free time with, or it's just simply finding another job and figuring out how you can get that. So that's maybe my first thing, is making that plan, but at the same time, not putting the pressure on your shoulders to immediately quit this job. That's always kind of my go-to, is like, all right, we hate it. We can identify that. But that doesn't mean that there's all of a sudden this all or nothing mentality that a lot of people take with a lot of things that says you have to quit tomorrow or you're just accepting it. You have to quit next month.
Yeah.
Again, make a plan ahead. But what do you have? I want to throw it to you.
Well, inversely, I'm the opposite of that case. And you know this. You went freelance before I even did. I always say that if I could go back in time, I would have quit 3 years earlier. My personality type is that I'm an overcommitter. So I'm the opposite. Mm-hmm. I'll plan and I'll plan and I'll plan and I'll plan. The difference is, to me, and this is now that I've coached for a little bit, now that I've helped a few creatives, I've had this sneaky suspicion that data plays a really big role in the way that we make decisions. So when we're talking about the plan, it's not just saying, hey, within 6 months I want to quit the job, or a year, 3 years, or whatever the case may be. It's sitting down and thinking through our services. So creatives a lot of the time put their value in the wrong place. Data is not, I'm a great designer, I'm a great videographer, I'm a great whatever. It doesn't matter. What does matter is, do you know what the value of what you do is actually worth? So being able to collect some data and think about what's my time worth? What kind of problems do I solve? That goes a long way in making a plan. I always say the first place you should start if we're going to go anywhere is budget. Do you even know what it costs for you to exist month to month? If you haven't collected that data, then you don't know how to make a plan. I'm sorry, you can't just say, I'm talented at this. It's just aiming at nothing. You might be fine, but when you have a bad month, you don't even know why it's a bad month. So collect data is a big thing that I push for. Understanding your personality is one area. And what's confirmed my suspicion is in recent time, my wife has started an Etsy account. She's making crafts. And here's the other thing. Anything, in entrepreneurship or creative services or whatever is creativity. It takes creativity. We're in a good position where, I provide for us, but she still wants to find some fulfillment and she wants to generate some income. So she's taken to like, what kind of hobbies can I make? And it wasn't like she wants to make a huge business, but she sat down, she thought through products. She thought through the cost of the materials. She thought through the time it would take. She did the research. She set the things up. And guess what? Within her first month, she actually got a cap put on her account because she was making too much money too quickly because she worked a plan so much better. Now, inversely, I went into this blind. So I'm speaking from a place of pain where I just went in and I'm like, I'm so passionate. I got to do this. And I have this great thing and yada, yada, yada. And oh my God, I can't pay my bills. And this is so stressful. I've been there.
Yeah.
So when I say have the data, make the plan, understand your budget, it took me 6 years to really nail that down. Mm-hmm. So, I say this and I preach this because it really does make a difference. And now when I make a decision, it's not like I spend every single month going through detailed like line items of what things are going to cost, what things are going to cost. I know what that is. And it's really easy for me to reverse engineer a plan to say, I need X amount of clients, X amount of type of work. This is the quality of people I want to work with. And then how do I massage and maintain that month over month and still grow in the process? So if I could go back in time, it would be collect the data, know your budget, and then work that plan and take baby steps out of it, not a 3-year baby step like I did.
Yeah. So I love that you bring up the baby steps thing because that's something I want to talk about. And I also want to cover the reverse engineering process of when you make that plan. But first, I do love that you brought up the personality type thing because that's something I wouldn't even have really thought about, I think. Because, like you said, I went freelance a few years before you did.
2 years.
Right? 2 years. Okay. And it's funny because at that point in time, I feel like I just sort of dove in, right? I was just like, oh, this job isn't working. And then I think that was at the point in time where I kind of had like a social media agency job that didn't work. And I don't know. There was just like things where I could identify, I don't like doing this. This sucks. This is draining me. How do I get out of this job that I hate, right? And jumped to a couple different ones and finally identified, I'm just going to try this freelance thing. So it's funny looking back now. Of course, again, we're sharing all this stuff via hindsight, but like I am sitting and I like am the person who's like emphasizing that plan, but also emphasizing the action into that plan, because that's something I think we should clarify as well, because making plans and having ideas is really easy and really fun. It's super fun to sit and talk about how much you don't like your job and how in 6 months you're going to leave. But it's the immediate part of it is to put things into action. And it's funny because, again, now I can think of that. But even back then, I don't necessarily remember, unless you remember it differently than I do, I don't remember making a plan to become freelance so much. I did just take that dive off the deep end. I went action first, and then I'll figure out the plan like as I go. And so I do think there is something to that personality type, because in the inverse, just like you said, you spent 3 years worth of planning and plotting and thinking and wondering and all this sort of stuff, making great decisions, sure, but like also, like you said, kind of holding yourself back from just taking that leap into things you really wanted to do, thus staying in a job that I wouldn't say you hated, but wasn't really what you wanted with life, right? Yeah. So I think, identifying that personality type, like taking a step backwards and saying, okay, am I the person who needs to just dive into this? Or does that sound cool? Because that can just sound cool to quit your job tomorrow and just dive in. Or am I the person that does need some time to plan for this? But I think no matter what aspect you look at it from, no matter what perspective or personality type that you can identify you have, it's the action that matters. You have to take the action into either planning out 6 months ahead to leave that job, put action into those baby steps, or, hey, you know what? I'm going to quit on Monday. I'm not going back. All right, cool. You're taking that action, but there has to be more action. that follows that, because there's going to be a domino effect, a cascade of what comes next. So in speaking of, whether it's making a plan or whatever, let's talk about both, taking baby steps. What does that look like? And also, what does just reverse engineering a plan to quit a job look like as well? So whichever one of those you want to talk to,
I'm going to talk about
first
both.
or both at the same time.
I'm going to talk about both.
Yeah.
Let's just get in the headspace for a second. I think the biggest thing is, and this comes from, I have creative friends that have either been doing it for a while and then they're like, I'm done with this. I'm going to go back to a day job and I want security. And COVID did this. That's fine. I'm okay with that. There's nothing wrong with taking a pause or taking a break or saying, I don't want to do this and I want to go work for someone else. That's A-okay. But the bigger thing that breaks my heart is when people don't understand that, like, what they're calling security is very false. In my business, I don't have a sense of security. And working for someone else, I don't have a sense of security. And I've seen this happen where it's like they give up the, I'm not going to pursue my dream anymore, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to build, I'm going to go work for someone else, and I have a paycheck that comes in consistently. It's really easy to create a consistent paycheck if you actually take the time to plan, cover this data, everything that I'm talking about, and create your own sense of security. But the problem is when someone goes and works for themselves, they want that freedom, but the reality is, in creating that freedom, you got to be willing to create your own structure. You don't have to use someone else's structure. So when you think about the plan, I think it's important to think about, what is the lifestyle that I want to have? Not even financially. Let's take that out, because I feel like people beat that to death. But like, how many hours do you want to work a week? Do you want to work 80? Are you willing to work 80? Would you prefer to work 20, 10, 5? What's it going to take to work those hours to do that thing? That's a good place to start. Your lifestyle. Thinking about financial, that's a different bucket. Thinking about the type of clients or the work that you want to take on or the service you want to provide and who that's for. That's another layer of this. So when we're thinking about planning things out, it's thinking about these elements of your life, not just saying, I don't want to work for my boss anymore. One of the biggest mistakes is, oh, I'm talented, I'm good at this thing, yada, yada, yada. That's all true. But there's a difference in being an artist and being an entrepreneur. There's a different mindset that you have to put into, because as the entrepreneur, you have to be the visionary. You have to be the manager, and you have to be the executor. Or you have to be willing to make enough money to hire the manager, to hire the executors, to live up here as the visionary. But most times you have to do all of those things, and you need to consider those different facets, how often you're going to do that, at what frequency you're going to do that, and at what capacity you're going to do that. So reverse engineering that, is it a year? Is it 6 months? What does that look like? How much? What lifestyle? How can you start to make baby steps into that? For us, if I could go back in time, it would really be looking at the quality of clients while I had a comfortable job. I would start to be more firm in the rates that we did. And I would bring in the people that I wanted to bring into, rather than, in some ways, just going for it and reevaluating, On the same side, what held me off for so long was, I heard this on some other podcast, but it's like, are you a fire, aim, ready, or are you a ready, aim, fire? Or are you even like me, which I feel like is a ready, aim, check to make sure you're loaded, aim again, then fire. Each one of those scenarios can be bad or good.
Yeah.
Obviously, a great plan can go a long way, but if you're over planning, if you're being too much of a perfectionist, which, hey, us creatives, we are very guilty of that. We're very worried of making those things happen. But for me, what really set it down is like, me and my wife, we wanted to settle down and have a kiddo. And I know, as being an overcommitted person, that if I didn't get out of my day job, I would never take the leap, because I'd always have that in the back of my head. I have to provide security. So I literally set a goal. I was like, I want to have my business before. I want to be out of this on my own, so that there's no life jacket out there. I just have to do that. And that's what I needed to make that push and to really figure things out. It added some extra pressure, but the thing that I know about myself is under pressure, I perform.
Mm-hmm. So one of the last things before we hit our 15 minutes here, what comes to mind when I, use the phrasing like life fulfillment in this? Because I think that's one more point that I'd love for us to add in here is, yes, in one way, how can we look at the job we hate, identify why we hate it, what we hate about it, but more so, what is not fulfilling you at that job? Because I think that's just as much as an important factor, if in some ways maybe more than the monetary thing, because you can go anywhere and you can find out how to make money from anything, whether it's on your own, working for another company, whatever that is. I think the thing that I love to help people focus on is what is missing in the factor of fulfillment. So what are we not getting at this job? Is it respect? Is it freedom? Is it creative? Is it whatever, right? Look at that, because I think that's important when you start making these steps outside of that job. I think how you structure the rest of your life in preparation for a new job is just as important as that new job. Because if you're not restructuring or refocusing on who you are, what else is fulfilling you in your life, you're going to go into a new job. It's going to be bright and shiny for a second. Oh, finally, I'm not at that place anymore. This place is going to be so much better. Then at some point, that honeymoon phase will probably wear off, unless you are going to a job that immediately fulfills something that is very important to you.
Yeah.
Hey, I went from stocking shelves to going to this job at a hunting store, and I get to talk to people about hunting stuff, and I love that stuff. All right. The honeymoon phase is going to probably last a lot longer. You're going to feel more fulfilled because you're having more conversations with more people that are like you, all that sort of stuff. Silly example, but you get the point. So that's one of my big things. And as we're wrapping up here, I want your thoughts on this. How important is that outside fulfillment, making sure your life is structured in a more fulfilling way at a default setting, rather than just blaming it on the job that we have and saying, that's what's draining me? Because I believe if you're not fulfilling yourself in other ways, it doesn't matter what job you're going to, if you're going into it with a half-empty cup anyway.
Well, this is a big question, but I'm going to pull it back to myself.
We can't do more 15. We can't do another 15 minutes.
Give me 15 minutes or I'll cover this.
Good.
No, but for real, fulfillment is everything. You know, I think in creative services, I'll rewind. Back when I was in college, my leadership professor had us do this exercise. This is where I find fulfillment from. And this was super powerful for me while I was at Lowe's, but also as I was building my business, was he had us go through this exercise at our day job and our just day-to-day life of marking down all the things that gave us energy and all the things that took energy away. And what I very quickly realized at Lowe's was that I didn't hate that job. I hated elements of the job. And the same goes for this too. It's like what I found was like I loved using math as a superpower. I loved figuring out projects. I loved taking these complex technical things and breaking them down to where my customers could get excited about their project, and suddenly that DIY thing could click in them and they could do it themselves. The sales, cool, fine. Same thing in my business. I've realized that for me, human connection, solving problems for people, really getting to know their problems and talking them through that is deeply fulfilling to me. Being a cinematographer, playing with the lights, you know, that is exciting when you do it. You know, making a certain revenue number each month or each year, that is exciting for a moment. It goes away really quick. Fulfillment for me is finding the thing that's your purpose, which is so deep, but I think taking that exercise to figure out what's giving your energy and then looking at that data. I'll come back to data over and over is like, what does that data mean to me? Maybe you don't get it right on the first guess, but the older I get, the more I realize I want to connect with people. I want to learn from people. As a filmmaker, I love the fact that I go into businesses and I could be working with leadership, I could be working with a client, and I get to learn something about experience. And that gets me so excited. As someone who's passionate about leadership, I'm so curious about how other leaders do things because that informs my own life, the way I want to build my own business. So fulfillment for me is like I'm a builder and I'm an innovator, and that's in my DNA through and through. There are going to be different things for each person, but I think whether you're in the job you hate right now or in your dream job, you still have to lead from the seat that you're in, whether you're at the head or whether you're in a supportive role. Finding fulfillment in that job right now is going to be the best thing you can do for yourself. And realizing there's things outside of your control that are unsavory, that's always going to exist no matter what.
Okay, so before we officially wrap this one up and say goodbye, what's actionable tips so we can give somebody who clearly they tapped on this episode for a reason? They clicked it. They're maybe thinking about it. They're trying to learn. Like, all right, maybe I have a job that I hate and I'm trying to navigate out of it. What is the actionable advice we're leaving them with in this episode?
I think it's two things. I think it's make the plan. All the things that we said here. Start to think about what that plan is. Put some freaking time limits on it too. Like if you really hate the job, give yourself a year, give yourself 6 months, give yourself a month if you really absolutely can't hate it. Secondly, use your opportunities. that exercise of what's giving you energy and what isn't. I'll prescribe that all day long. Whether you're in your dream job now or not, start making a list. Put in some effort to collect data. If you can't do that, then you can't make an informed decision. If you're not making an informed decision, when something doesn't work out, you have nothing to really point to. Whereas if you have something to point to, you can start to make adjustments and changes, and it's not an utter failure and say, this just doesn't work for me, I'm not built for it. It's like, no, I'm willing to commit to action.
Okay, Josh, if anybody has any follow-up questions about this, they want to talk to you about this more, or maybe they want some secret advice and tips that they feel like you didn't share on this episode, where can people find you around the internet?
Instagram at jmemerick. Love the DMs, love the conversations, always willing to chat. This is right up my alley.
Love it. I am at Ross Theisen now around the internet. This show was at WYDH Pod. Josh, that was another 15-Minute Friday. Thank you so much.